Good morning, everyone, and welcome to FlowPower's webinar today. Today we're going to be talking about demand response and how you can use it to generate some additional revenues or additional savings for your business. I'm joined by James and Aidan. I'll let them both introduce themselves. How are you going, James?
Yeah, good morning. Hi, everyone. My name's James McFarlane. I'm one of the technical business development managers here at Flow. And I come from an electrical engineering and a sales background. So my job is really to work with customers and the equipment and the assets that you have, and then really try to find the best contract for you and really just trying to open up savings wherever possible.
Thanks, James. And Aidan, how are you going?
Good morning, gentlemen. Yeah, I'm well, thank you. My name's Aidan Moore. I head up the trading and pass-through pricing function here at FlowPower. So generally sort of lurk in the background and find hedges and do a bit of trading to support our customers and our retail products where there's a fixed price component.
Thanks, guys. My name's Jacob. I've been at FlowPower for around 5 years now, and energy consultancy prior to that. Working pretty much in the kind of demand response and power purchasing agreement areas. So between the three of us, hopefully we can give you a bit of a understanding of demand response and, as we said, how businesses can take advantage of it. So today we're going to start with a bit of a market update that Aidan will give us. We'll move through to, I guess, what demand response is. So kind of working through the different types of it, the different ways that you can benefit from it. We'll touch on a few different tools that you can use to do effective demand response. And then we'll finish off with a case study, and pending on how long we waffle on for, we might have time for a couple of questions at the end. We'll see how we go. So to get us started, Aidan, you're probably best placed to, I guess, talk about what's going on in the market at the moment and what this upcoming summer looks like.
Yeah, sure thing. We could spend an entire webinar on chatting about the market in 2021 and the outlook for summer. So I'll try and keep it brief, but it's been an exceptional year in the national electricity market, probably commodity markets globally as well. But for you on the line, what will be most relevant is what's happening here in the NEM. We've swung from long-term low spot prices and contract prices in Q1 after a mild and very nicely renewable-backed summer. Delivered very soft spot prices during January, February, March of this year across all states. We climbed out of that pretty quickly, particularly in the north of the country, in Queensland and New South Wales to a lesser extent, on the back of an explosion at the Callide Power Station, Callide C Power Station in May, and a few other variables like higher gas prices and cold weather. Q2 delivered the strongest ever Q2 spot prices in Queensland and the highest Q2 spot prices in New South Wales for a number of years. So we swung very quickly from lows to highs, and with it went the contract market, the hedging market, or effectively the price you might see for retail contracts if you're looking to take a 1, 2, or a 3-year contract. We've sort of eased a little bit into spring, but certainly all eyes to the upcoming summer, given some of the variability that we've seen in prices so far in 21.
Yeah, interesting that we've got obviously La Nina forecast, which I guess is going to be a wetter and more mild summer, but we're still seeing those forward prices pretty high. What do you put that down to?
Yeah, that's a good pickup. Summer 2021 was a La Nina summer, and it obviously was very mild, and spot prices were very low. Yet the forward market is telling us that it's going to be a pretty strong summer, particularly in Queensland, to a lesser extent New South Wales. La Nina is typically associated with higher rainfall and cooler temps, but that higher rainfall can lead to mugginess and higher humidity, obviously in northern parts of the NEM, which can boost air conditioning load and increase demand. But also that higher rainfall brings with it associated higher cloud cover, and that could also impact the amount of solar in the system over the summer as well. So remains to be seen how it plays out. I don't think we'll get the summer that we last had, and clearly the market's not expecting that either. How La Nina influences prices, I think, will be interesting to follow, particularly with the other feature of the market being the change to 5-minute settlement that occurred on the 1st of October, where the market now settles at a 5-minute granularity instead of a 30-minute as it used to before that date. So yeah, a number of elements that are keeping the market guessing heading into summer.
Yeah, sure. And I guess keeping with you, Aidan, this next chart kind of shows how, I guess, summer affects your overall electricity price. Do you want to go, I guess, talk through the difference between these kind of charts?
Yeah, what we're looking at here is the ASX energy prices for the upcoming 4 quarters of 2022, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and a couple of things should be noticeable. Obviously, the 4 regions shown as well. What should be noticeable is the higher prices expected in Q1 versus the rest of the quarters, and so we are still in a summer peaking market from a demand perspective and a price perspective across all states. High air conditioning load, obviously, when we're sitting on the back of high temperatures, as we all love in the Australian summer. But that brings about higher price expectations, and that's what the market's telling us at the moment. The charts are showing an expectation for the average underlying prices below $300 in the spot market, and also a view around the cap, which is that orange bolt on to the top. And so you can see there a large amount of the differential between Q1 and the subsequent quarters is driven by that much greater cap. And so that's a view around the traders' expectations for volatility. We would say that as demand response opportunities, which appear to be much greater in summer than at other times, notwithstanding that there are opportunities right throughout the year.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I guess just simply these orange periods here, periods when prices are quite high on the spot market, but they typically don't go for as long. So it's not as many hours here. We're talking, it could be 10, 20 hours for the quarter compared to this blue, which is the rest of it. So customers that have flexible loads that are able to reduce consumption, for a few hours at a time over a few days of the quarter, can chip away at this and effectively reduce it for their overall yearly electricity spend. Which probably takes us to our next point, which is what is demand response and what are we talking about? And James, you're probably best placed to talk to that.
Yeah, sure. So basically, what is demand response? Well, in its simplest form, it's electricity demand, and then how do individuals and businesses respond? And it can either be responding to a lack of supply, or it can be responding to high prices. And it's not terribly complicated to achieve. And really, if we understand, maybe if you go to the next slide, Jacob, it's sort of really understand why are we talking about demand response these days. It's something that really has always been there, but it's really becoming more and more sort of prevalent in the discussions around energy. And what we see here in front of us is in the black curve is a traditional peak and an off-peak chart that happens throughout a 24-hour day. And so if you wanted to respond to the demand, do some demand response, you had a 12-hour block that you had to avoid, and that's that higher peak that you see, from about 8 o'clock through to about 10 o'clock. So if you wanted to, say, shift business operations, you had to shift it by 12 hours, which is, pretty impossible, really. Whereas actually now what you see in the orange chart is that's really the underlying price of electricity as it changes through the day. And so you see this morning peak in that orange sort of block in the morning, and then in the orange block in the afternoon, you see that second peak. And what that means is that really there's just a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the afternoon and early evening where there's this high pricing. And so suddenly, rather than having to shift operations by 13 hours, you can just avoid a little bit of time in the morning and a little bit of time in the afternoon. And then the other great feature is that sort of green block in the middle, where you have these low prices in the middle of the day, which coincides with normal business operations. So it really opens up all these opportunities for demand response around the natural business operation hours.
Yeah, thanks, James. And I guess it's kind of changing the conversation a little bit from demand response to demand management. In the past, we've always talked about demand response being kind of, shut everything off for a few hours at when the grid, is really struggling to kind of match the supply. But this demand management conversation is more about like small things you can do through the day to move away from these higher price periods and into these lower price periods. And that could be as simple as, if you've used forklifts at your business and everyone goes home at 6 p.m. and plugs in their forklifts, they plug them in, but you set a timer so that doesn't actually start until 10 p.m. You're achieving the same thing, no interruptions to your process whatsoever. However, you're avoiding this. And if you can do, 4 or 5 things like that, they can really stack up. Obviously, to achieve that, you do need to be on some sort of wholesale linked or wholesale contract, which can be facilitated in a few different ways. So there are a couple of ways to, benefit from demand response. The one we're talking about just then is wholesale demand response. So that's where you're linked to a wholesale contract or the spot market, as we've kind of talked about a little bit. Another way to do it is through a program called RERT, which basically pays you for reducing your load during those really peak periods. This could happen, I think just from memory, it's probably happened 4 times over the last, 3 or 4 years. And can go on from anywhere between 2 to say 4 hours. And it's, basically when the grid's about to black out. So basically AMO allows businesses to put their hand up and say, hey, I can reduce my load now, and you'll get paid to do that. When the next step is basically we're going to start turning people's powers off because we have no other choice. So you can actually combine these two. You can basically, if you are on a wholesale linked contract, like FlowPower's Power Active, you can also enroll in RERT, and you can both get paid while you're reducing your price as well. So yeah, this one on the left is about getting paid for offering demand response, and this one on the right is about avoiding costs. And I guess just to break those down a little bit further, there are a few different reasons you could do demand response, or a few different benefits of demand response. We've kind of touched on price, but Aidan, maybe you could go through, I guess, that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, so what we see there, that first bullet point around cost avoidance, I think you hit that on the head in terms of being linked to that wholesale pass-through contract or shape pass-through contract, whereby when prices get particularly high in the market for those short periods of time, you get out of the way of it, shut down your operations or partially shut down your operations, and obviously avoid paying out that cost. There's also that second point that James hit on in terms of demand management and harnessing those negative prices. Negative prices are becoming somewhat predictable for those daytime hours, particularly in sort of the shoulder periods of the market, or when we've got clear blue skies and that are pumping out the solar, and so that presents a fairly consistent opportunity for harnessing negative prices at the moment, day in, day out. You can also shape your price efficiency adjustment. So if you don't want to be on a purely wholesale pass-through contract, we have a product called Power Active, which allows you to lock in a base price, but have the opportunity around the load optimization pass-through via the price efficiency adjustment. In other terminology, that's just a load shape factor, and so even if you're not on our products, you should be able to get benefit from making small changes to improve that when you go to tender and retailers look at your load shape in future. So that should be priced in more favourably if you've made some changes. The last piece outside of the energy charge is opportunities around the network demand charges that you can avoid. In Victoria, we have a number of days in which your annual network tariff is set based on how you consume during those extreme days, which you're notified of in advance, and so you can obviously do a bit of DR on those days to reduce your network costs throughout the year. But also anyone who's on a network demand charge may also make changes on a monthly basis to reduce that cost or that component of their invoice. So energy and network, there's a couple of opportunities there.
For sure, and I think those network ones are a great way to dip your toes in. You're actually automatically enrolled in those, so you don't have to do anything. In most cases, you're just paying for them. So by speaking with engineering consultancy or something like that, they can kind of point out when those periods are and how you can reduce your load during those times, and they can make a pretty big impact to your bill as well. I guess other reasons, we actually do hear more and more companies kind of coming to us and wanting to do demand response for, I guess, altruistic reasons, and that's around reducing carbon used in the production of electricity. It's very fortunate that currently high prices correlate with high fossil fuel generation, and low prices correlate with high renewable generation. So if you are just responding because of price, you actually are going to be using greener energy as well. But we do have businesses that literally will try and tie their electricity consumption around renewables in the grid as well, which is awesome to see. And I guess by doing that, you're encouraging more renewables to be built and discouraging fossil fuels to continue to be used as well, because they're eventually going to get a lower price. And the last reason we kind of touched on, but James, you want to go into a bit more detail around the grid stability piece?
So, I mean, similar that, price is about high demand, and equally price is also around how much renewables are in the market. Price also correlates to grid stability. So when there's high prices, there's lots of demand and then typically not enough supply. And so really by doing demand response, you can help reduce the amount of demand that's in the system, which is also then having this other benefit of, helping everybody else stay online. So not only are you avoiding cost, not only are you greening your own power, you're also then helping everybody else stay online, and really helping to avoid a blackout where somebody else will choose who goes offline, as opposed to you maybe getting a benefit at your own choosing. So really, there's just the stability of the grid is really helped by demand response.
Yeah, great. So yeah, definitely plenty of reasons to look into it. I guess, yeah, what businesses would be asking now is how do we actually do it? So James, you're probably, yeah.
So yeah, we've kind of just been speaking about why do you do demand response, and why are we talking about demand response? So really, then how do you do it? And that's what we've been looking at is it can be very simple interventions in your operations. So it can be as simple as moving, say, from 1 hour to the next. It could be moving operations from 1 day to the next if you're looking at sort of more avoiding summer peaks. It could be small operations of just minimizing operating, say, the charging of forklifts or charging electric vehicles in the afternoon. And really then just planning your operations around that low cost energy that's produced in the middle of the day. So it's quite simple, it's quite accessible choices. And really, what does that mean? Well, it means that you're using the assets that you have more effectively. So do you have electric vehicles? Do you have a battery? Do you have a generator? It's just about maybe using the time of them differently, or about harnessing them differently and planning your operations maybe a little bit differently, but using the assets that you've already got on hand, you're just doing it more effectively. So that's the how, that's the who. Now this is the who. So who can take advantage of this? So these are some of the customers or the industry types that Flow Power have already. And these are people who've either got quite flexible operations or have a high degree of automation. And that's not to say that you need either one of those things, but it just makes demand response quite accessible. So a really good fit is agribusiness. You typically lots of pumps, not typically then lots and lots of time critical functions. There are things that can be moved an hour or two. The same with manufacturing, lots of automation, maybe very critical operations, but can you schedule a production run around the price of electricity? Equally, cold stores can really respond to low prices where you can chill things quite intensely, and then when high prices you just turn off the refrigeration unit, which is a really similar analogy to a commercial building, which happens to be the largest energy user of a type of energy user in the country. So can you pre-cool and then just not consume electricity at periods of high prices, which is then also the same for any large air conditioning unit, a shopping center, schools. There's lots and lots of applications where just changing how you use your air conditioning systems can really impact the price of the power that you're purchasing. And then equally, water services, you've got this very large transfer of water, which typically doesn't have to happen all of the time. So there's quite flexible operations. And then it should come as no surprise that an aquatic center, which has lots of air conditioning and lots of water, is actually also a really good fit.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, James. And I guess There's also those with naturally good fits that don't even almost have to do demand response. Like you mentioned schools before. Schools use a lot of electricity before kind of 4 p.m. when prices are already cheap. And if they're on just a standard fixed price electricity contract, they're not actually getting rewarded for that. They're just substituting, other people with bad load profiles. So if you do have a heavy daytime load, definitely worth looking into, wholesale linked kind of electricity agreements. And I guess just next to touch on the kind of tools that you can use to, help you or business with demand response. And these are a few that we offer at Flow Power. So a customer portal is something that all of our customers get access to. That's going to give you your live energy price. It's going to give you your live energy consumption and give you a forecast of the daily electricity rate as well, so that you can kind of plan operations around that, that spot price. If you want to go a bit further than that, we have a market monitoring service that gives you access to a few more things. So the first one there is the market forecast tool. That gives you a week ahead view of what the wholesale price is doing, so that you can plan your week around, and that's updated every day. So basically you could look and say, great, Monday to Friday, the daytime price is really low. I'm going to try and push as much process into that as possible. And on Thursday afternoon, maybe it's a hot day and 5 to 8 p.m. is looking particularly high or dangerous, and you can kind of try and avoid that period. So that's really useful. And the final one there, which comes as part of the same service, is our market monitoring service, which notifies you of high price events and can also be used to automate equipment around. And we'll discuss that a little bit here on this next slide. So here's an example of a high price event. So we have a market monitoring team that consists of a group of engineers and analysts that are constantly watching the market. And if they do see expected high prices, so these are those kind of few times a year where prices are really high and you want to do what you can to reduce load as much as possible. They'll provide a forecast with an idea of the likelihood that that event's going to go ahead. As we approach the event and we get some more information, they'll either confirm it or say that it's not going to go ahead. And then they'll click start. At that point, you want to start reducing your load, and then they'll tell you when the event's ended and you can bring your load back on. We also provide post-event reviews as well. And just the same, we can do this with automated equipment. So if you've got pumps or generators or anything like that that can be automated with a controller, we can actually send a signal to turn that generator on. And all your guys on site need to do is see that an event's coming through, click approve, and we'll take care of the rest. So they're the ones where this can be really easy and can create pretty big savings for the year. And we've actually got an example here on the next slide of a Flow Power customer. Jane, yeah.
So exactly. So this is a Victorian agribusiness. They're an irrigator, and actually they've been using the tools that Jacob just went through in the sort of 2 slides previously. And so what they're doing is they've sat down that they have large pumps that sort of transfer from irrigation pipelines through to holding dams. Then from holding dams, they've got smaller pumps that then push out and irrigate their crop. So there's lots of kind of electrical demand that can be scheduled. What they're doing then is using our market forecasting tools to then plan their operations. So if their dams are full and they don't necessarily need to top them up on a very hot day, then we can then, Flow Power can notify them of an event. And so what we see here on the charts in front of us is that the blue chart on the top is their electrical consumption or their demand. And they've continued as business as usual. On the bottom is the orange chart, and it's tracking along quite nicely until suddenly there's a price spike. And so Flow Power then has notified this customer of a pricing event, and they have planned operations, and then they take their pumps offline. And what you see is that real dip in operations. So the price spikes up. They have then ridden through without consuming that electricity. The prices then return to normal. They turn back on their pumps and they return to business as usual. So this has then continued on through the same day, and then a second event has happened. And the same deal, so where Flow Power will then notify them, they'll take their pumps offline, the pumps will be offline while the price is high, and then returns to business as usual. And so this is actually a really great example of, You know, they've planned their operations around the price of power. They've used the notification tools that we can provide. They've really only turned off for a few hours during a day. And what they've done is actually saved 11% of their total annual power consumption bill, which is a pretty spectacular result for a very small amount of intervention.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to save 11%, and these are a big user, as many agribusinesses are. To save 11% on your energy costs for doing a bit of work on 2 days, but not really affecting your process, is pretty wild. So they're a really great example of, I guess, what can be achieved. So thanks, guys. I think that kind of brings us to the end of the presentation. We've probably got a couple of minutes for questions. So if you have the portal open, just type in under chat if you've got any questions. Quickly to note, okay, so we've got one that's come through. How can I respond quickly to no notice on a signal? Not too sure what that one's trying to say. I think it might be around, I guess, when
Short
maybe
notice.
an event is short notice. Yeah, okay, well, look, you're on top for Aidan, so maybe you can answer that one for us.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, we've got tools, we've got expertise to read and to predict what's happening in the market. But as you can imagine, wrangling the NEM is somewhat of a beast, and so things change unexpectedly. Cloud cover may roll over, and a bunch of solar can get knocked out of a suburb or a city or a state. A power station might explode and take its generation out of the market, like we saw in May. So some of the events are predictable and forecast based on weather, based on availability of generators, who's on maintenance and who's available, and some are unpredictable. That's just the nature of the market, and we certainly endeavour to forecast events accurately where it's possible to do so, but some spikes pop out of nowhere. That's not the end of the world if you're unable to respond because it's happened at short notice, or it's just popped up in the next trading interval. Some element of price spike is already built into your retail product or into your annual spend in the background. You probably just don't know it at the moment. Those cap premiums that we looked at earlier in the presentation are baked in some way, shape or form to your retail agreement. So it certainly an erroneous price spike here or there won't destroy your monthly bill or your annual bill by any means, but it is a reality of the DR world that some unexpected activities do happen at times.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess doing demand response isn't about capturing every single event, because not many are going to be able to do that unless you've got true automation of something that can always go off. But even if you're capturing half the events of the year, you're going to be in a far better position than someone that's not doing anything. So also a good opportunity to talk about our forecasting tool, which actually has above a 70% rate of accuracy when it comes to forecasting these events. So we are usually able to give a good amount of warning, I guess, for events that are likely to occur. So that's probably going to take us home. We did talk for a little bit long, so it brings us just to 11 o'clock. So we'll finish up there. Thanks very much, James and Aidan, for joining. And yeah, if you've got any questions, I think our contact details might be on the last page. So if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with any of us three, and we'll leave it with that.